Welcome everybody to the first ever edition of BasketBrawl, brought to you by NBA Math, where only the best points survive. I'm your arrogantly humble host, Brian Sampson. You can find me on Twitter at BrianSampsonNBA. The way the game works is simple. There are 7 rounds. I have assigned each of these fighters questions beforehand, and they've submitted their top answers to me, which I've then assigned them to argue back and forth. The first 4 rounds, they'll each have ample amount of time to debate their answers, and at the end of the round, I will take only the information that they're using and assign a winner and award a point. We'll do that one question at a time for the first 4 rounds, and then for the last 3 rounds is a lightning style. So each competitor will only have 30 seconds to share their information and make their point, and then a point will be awarded at the end of each of those 30 seconds for the competitors. At the end, whoever has the most points wins. Simple? So we'll start with one of our competitors today, Adam Fromal. He is the founder of NBA Math and a writer about the NBA for Bleacher Report. Adam's favorite cartoon character is Randall from Recess, and he enjoys doing long division before bed. Adam, what's your favorite thing about Dan?
Oh man, I think it's probably the tattoos, Blink-182 style.
Sounds good. Our other competitor is Dan Favale. You can find him on Twitter at Dan Favale. Dan is a deputy editor for NBA Math, and he also writes about the NBA for Bleacher Report. Dan enjoys wearing bro tanks and drinking protein shakes, but not actually lifting. Dan, what is your favorite thing about yourself?
I think just my face. I think it's really, perfect.
Perfect for radio?
Good one.
And I don't know if I introduced Adam in his Twitter handle. You can find him on Twitter at Fromal09 or 09. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started with the first question. The question that we're going to start off with is who's going to win the MVP award for the 2017-18 season? Dan, you picked LeBron James, and you're going to go first. Adam, you'll have your rebuttal, and you have Kawhi Leonard. Dan, the floor is all yours.
The justification for LeBron James, does it even need to be made? He hasn't won since 2012, 2013 because people were sick of voting for him after 4 wins. And I think 2 things matter for him. One, there's the context of this season now. Kyrie Irving wanted to leave the Cavaliers because he basically didn't want to play with LeBron James or wanted to be the alpha somewhere else. That's going to trigger something within James. He is going, I think it's even been reported by ESPN that he's just obsessed with this season. It's easy to say that in September and October, but I think he's going to care about the regular season more than he has in quite some time. And can we just admit that he's been shafted in so many of these MVP races since? There were clear winners when Stephen Curry was unanimous. But you look at last year, the top 5 finishers for the MVP award, and you look at the net rating differentials for their team, where what their net rating is without them compared to what it is with them, and the gap between, LeBron James led the top 5 vote getters. He was above Russell Westbrook, above Isaiah Thomas, above James Harden, above Kawhi Leonard, and Westbrook was the closest to him, and he still had that 4-point net rating edge. That's a huge deal to me. I know he's 33. I know you're supposed to slip off. I know he enters cruise control, but he's still so damn good. And when you add in what's going to happen with Kyrie Irving, coupled with the fact that I do kind of think writers and people and just NBA Twitter in general and people around the league are steering fans and voters and just everyone in that direction that LeBron is going to win, I think this is, if he was going to get a 5th award, this is the year it's going to happen, and I think it's ultimately going to happen.
I mean, there's a big difference between who should win and who actually will win. So LeBron probably should have won a lot more than he already has, but that doesn't mean he's actually going to win. And you mentioned context, but there are 2 pieces of that you overlooked, and one is that he just plays in the East. And I genuinely don't think any player in the Eastern Conference this year has a legitimate shot at MVP just because everybody has gone out of their way to denigrate that entire conference. No matter what you do, it's going to be tainted by playing in the weaker half of the NBA. Kawhi doesn't have that issue because he's playing in the unbelievably loaded Western Conference, and he and Gregg Popovich are still going to team up to elevate pretty high up the standings. I mean, they're going to be in competition for home court advantage. Secondly, LeBron is dealing with a much stronger supporting cast. And, they're not as good as the names would indicate, but even if you look at our Crystal Basketball rankings, I mean, beyond Kawhi and LeBron, it goes Isaiah Thomas and Kevin Love before Aldridge. Then it goes Jay Crowder before Danny Green. Then Tristan Thompson and Dwayne Wade before Pau Gasol. His team from top to bottom is better. This is very much a one-man show in San Antonio, which is pretty antithetical to what they've been over the last decade. He's made a monumental impact on both ends of the court. He's still a top finisher in Defensive Player of the Year races. Their net rating without him, or offensive rating last year without him, was 105.2, which would have tied with the Pelicans for 26th place. With him on the court, 115.4, that would have trailed only Golden State. So, I mean, he's a huge impact player on both ends of the court, and context works severely in his favor.
I don't think context works severely in his favor. And I understand the argument, the whole who should win versus who actually wins. We can't use the Eastern Conference to pull LeBron from that conversation. I go back to the net rating differential. The Cavs were 16.2 points better per 100 possessions when they played with him compared to without him. And he's not playing with as many superstars now as Russell Westbrook. His supporting cast is good, but you name Isaiah Thomas, who probably won't play till January or February. And I think if we're going to really go deeper into this, the Spurs have this other MVP named Gregg Popovich, who kind of hurts Kawhi Leonard's case because there are people out there who still thinks that he's a little bit of a product of their system. They pointed towards the on-off defensive numbers last year at the beginning of the season. They'll do the same thing this year when it turns out that the Spurs have a positive net rating with Kawhi Leonard off the floor. And that might unfairly hurt him, but when you wrap all of this together, and I think we have to kind of consider the season that LeBron is going to have because of the Irving situation, I don't know how you make a case against him. And the thing with me for Kawhi Leonard, he misses the preseason because he's injured. We assume he's going to be healthy to start the year, and he is a superhuman, but what if he's not? What if LeBron ends up playing in more games than him? What if Gregg Popovich rests him more than the Cavaliers rest LeBron? That's a distinct possibility, and that sample size is going to factor into the final case.
Well, let's not forget that LeBron just rolled his ankle and is questionable for the season opener, which happens to be against Kyrie, and missing that game could be an immediate black mark on his resume. And we talk about LeBron as this superhuman who isn't allowed to bleed and isn't allowed to get hurt. But as you said earlier, he's 33 years old, and only 3 players have won MVP at that stage of their career. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Karl Malone, both big men who typically age a little bit better than the super athletic wings, and Michael Jordan, who had far less wear and tear at 35 thanks to baseball and a bit of a delayed entry into the NBA. So at this point, including the playoffs and the regular season, LeBron has 50,399 minutes under his belt. When Michael Jordan retired after his age 39 season, he only had 48,485. That's a lot of mileage. So, I mean, maybe this ankle injury isn't a sign of, he's suddenly getting vulnerable, but age is a factor here.
Quick point.
But I have to say, you named Michael Jordan, and LeBron is in the GOAT conversation, so you can't. I just don't think we can hold him to the same trajectory.
But the point
as
is that
else.
MJ won at 35, and even at 39, he had fewer minutes played than LeBron James has entering this age 33 season.
Right, but these transcendent players are worthy of exceptions, and I think LeBron has done nothing to this point to show that he's anything but incredibly durable, and I don't know that we can use a rolled ankle or just the fact that he's going to turn 33 in December as this case against him. Now, I understand that the MVPs are typically younger.
Can we really use preseason injury to a 26-year-old as saying that he's not going to play a lot during the season?
Also, the playoff injury he had last year in the Western Conference Finals, and the fact that the Spurs rest their players like crazy.
I think you guys have done a great job of explaining your points. Adam, I liked how you dropped the NBA Math Crystal Ball rankings in there, so everyone make sure you go and check those out. I got to say, though, I think that this point goes to Dan. He made a great point about the net rating, and the Cavs' success, like Dan pointed out, clearly depends on LeBron being on the court. They've proven in the past that when he's off the court, it's somewhat of a disaster. So, Dan, you get the point for this one. And the first ever point for BasketBrawl. Dan takes a 1-0 lead here going into the second round. The question this time is who will win the Rookie of the Year for the 2017-2018 season? Adam, he's going to start us out. He has Lonzo Ball. Dan, he's going to rebuttal. He picked Ben Simmons. So, Adam, you're up first.
Yes, so just as is the case with MVP awards, Rookie of the Year is, again, largely about perception. It's about who's going to tell the most compelling story during their rookie season and who's going to put up the biggest per-game numbers. We've seen that with Michael Carter-Williams and Tyreek Evans in the past. So if you look at the situations these two teams find themselves in, Ben Simmons is going to have to deal with Markelle Fultz cannibalizing some votes and Joel Embiid getting all of the attention in Philadelphia. Everybody loves Embiid. They're going to credit a lot of the team's success to him whenever he's on the floor. Meanwhile, Ball enters this rookie season as one of the most hyped first-year players we've seen in a while just because he plays in LA. he's going to get a ton of credit for any improvements that are made to their ball movement because of his passing. We've already seen Coach Nick over at B-Ball Breakdown, his love for the passing exploits has already become a bit memeable, with people giving credit to increased ball movement even when Lonzo has nothing to do with it. But beyond that, I'm not sure that Ball has an exploitable weakness quite like Ben Simmons. We know that Simmons can't shoot. He's shown no ability to change that during the preseason. And once he starts going up against top-tier NBA defenders, that becomes something that defenses can actually make matter if they sag off him and cut off the passing lanes a bit. So we have concerns about Ball's shooting form, but at least he shot 41.2% on his threes in the NCAA, whereas Simmons just thrived on his athleticism and getting by weaker defenders in the SEC and during the non-conference schedule to get his points. So I don't know that Ball has that one discernible weakness that's going to be exploited time and time again, whereas there are legitimate concerns about Simmons, both from a perception standpoint and his actual play.
Ben Simmons does have an exploitable weakness, and I'm to make a case against him a little bit, like he shot under 33%, but he doesn't need to have a jumper to be this effective because he's already this otherworldly passer, and the Sixers are obsessed, and we've heard it from Brett Brown before they drafted Markelle Fultz, after they drafted Markelle Fultz. They want the ball in his hands. The ball is going to be in his hands when it matters, and he's going to get some good looks at the rim. Maybe they'll run him through the post, and they're going to be able to mitigate the problems with his jumper by running some pick and rolls where he's the roll guy or have him, and he's going to be a pretty good defender, which we don't necessarily see from rookies. And I keep coming back to the fact that he's not even a real rookie, which gives him an advantage over everybody else. He's had the year in the league to build up his body, to understand the grind of the NBA season a little bit more just by being around the Sixers. Another thing that's going to help him a great deal, he's going to make meaningful contributions for a team that might make the playoffs. And we saw what that did for Malcolm Brogdon last year. And you compare that to Lonzo Ball, who's going to play on, despite what LeVar Ball might say, a very, 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 very bad Los Angeles Lakers team. And he's going to have some of his touches monopolized. Will Pope, he's going to need the ball in his hands a bit. Same with Jordan Clarkson, Brandon Ingram, Julius Randle, maybe Kyle Kuzma a little bit. Brook Lopez will probably ditch any post-up touches he gets for more spot-up threes, and that's fine. Lonzo Ball will deserve a lot of credit for their improvements, but you just look at everything that Ben Simmons has done, and I'm going to have to come back to the passing where I think that there might be a point in this season when we look back at the end of the season and talk about, wow, Ben Simmons was the best facilitator among this rookie class. And when that's supposed to be Lonzo Ball's greatest strength, the fact that there's someone in his rookie class now or someone who's up for Rookie of the Year honors that might be better than him at the best aspect of his game, that would be not a red flag, but that I think is going to work against him pretty substantially.
So you mentioned that the Sixers could make the playoffs, and I think that's one of the reasons that Simmons might actually be in trouble is because expectations for this really young Sixers team, and young teams typically don't win a lot of games in the NBA just because they don't have the experience factor. So the Vegas over-under was set at 41.5 games. If they only win 39 games, even if they're in playoff contention, then their season could be viewed as a disappointment just because they didn't improve by as much as was expected, and that could hurt perception. Second, we haven't talked about the injury. You said that he's a second-year player who's actually a rookie, but that's because he had a foot injury that kept him out for an entire season, and foot injuries have been pretty perilous for big guys in the past. And even though he's a ball handler, he's not exactly tiny. I mean, he's 6'10", 240. If there's a recurring issue there, if he gets hurt again, we haven't seen any indication that he can handle the rigors of an NBA schedule. And even though there's a lot of talent around Ball in Los Angeles, there isn't another primary ball handler to take away touches from him. Caldwell Pope is going to shoot a lot off the ball. Brook Lopez is going to be a spot-up guy who helps stretch out the court, and he'll take some touches in the post. But Philadelphia actually has another primary ball handler in Markelle Fultz, who they're going to work with a ton. So that's going to take away touches, and it's going to corral what Simmons can do because he won't always have the ball in his hands.
Last word, Dan.
The Lakers do have guys who are going to take the ball out of Lonzo Ball's hands. The Lakers want to develop Brandon Ingram into a primary ball handler. He's going to have a high usage rate. Jordan Clarkson's not the best off-ball guy. Same with Julius Randle. Those guys are going to take more touches away from ball than I think you're crediting. Simmons, It's a fair point. He's never made it through the rigors of an NBA season. Neither has Lonzo Ball. And I get that there's the injury history there with Ben Simmons, but he is also, we can't go into this assuming this isn't Joel Embiid, that he's just not going to be healthy or that the injuries are going to be a factor. And when you look at Joel Embiid, how many games is Joel Embiid going to play in? If we're talking about people taking away from their teammates, Embiid might play or probably will play in less than 60 games, even if he's healthy. That's going to give Ben Simmons more touches. We've seen that the Sixers are willing to use Markelle Fultz off the ball more than Ben Simmons, even as Markelle goes through these weird spurts with his jumper. Lonzo Ball isn't shooting that well during the preseason. He was 25% from three-point range as of today, and Ben Simmons is averaging more assists per 36 minutes. He's already the better rookie, and yes, it's only preseason. Yes, Lonzo Ball is spectacular in Summer League, but Ben Simmons is this transcendent player, and I think that's going to be reflected more so immediately than with Lonzo Ball in Los Angeles.
All right. I think you guys both made really good points and had really good arguments. I think the thing that stuck with me the most was about Ben Simmons passing and how he is this, I would say, underrated passer up to this point, and how that could end up being a better attribute than Lonzo Ball's passing. So sorry, Adam. You're 0 for 2. Dan takes his point again.
Coming for the sweep.
So the third question, with Dan taking a 2-0 lead and calling for Adam's head and the sweep, is who is going to win the Sixth Man of the Year award. Dan, he picked Will Barton. Adam, he picked Tristan Thompson. I almost forgot who you picked, Adam. So, Dan, you're going to start first. You're with Will Barton.
The Denver Nuggets have just this dearth of wings all of a sudden, and Will Barton's going to come off the bench, and he's going to need to play a huge role just because they can't keep running these clunky forwardy lineups where Juan Hernan-Gomez is their three. And imagining him in kind of a more expanded role, when you look at what he was already been able to do over the past couple seasons, he's not just a good off-ball scorer. And he's also not just – he works sometimes on defense. I get that there are holes there, but he's an underrated distributor. He ran more pick and rolls for the Nuggets last year than anyone else on the team per game. That's a big deal, and that number is probably going to need to increase because their point guard situation, too, is also kind of wonky. And then you just look at the kind of steady production that he's had since arriving there. In the 2 full seasons he's been with the Nuggets, per 36 minutes, 17.7 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 3.6 assists with a 35.5% three-point clip. 4 players have matched that during that 2-season span. Kevin Durant, Marc Gasol, Pau Gasol, and Paul George. That's it. And per 36 minutes, yeah, he's not going to get 36 minutes, but he probably could get a little bit more playing time. His usage rate is going to increase a little bit. We're going to see him get more looks off the ball that are clean from beyond the arc and off cuts because you're playing with Paul Millsap and Nikola Jokic at points. And I think he's really going to anchor what is one of the better bench units, or he's just going to be more integral to a Denver bench unit that is kind of shallow on wings and even secondary facilitators. And I don't know that we talk about Will Barton enough within the context of this type of conversation.
I'm not sure how he's going to have an expanded role as a ball handler while also playing more off the ball and thriving as a cutter. So he already played 28.4 minutes per game last year. That's not going to increase that much. So I don't know that you're looking at a big jump in per game minutes. And whatever he does, it's going to largely be taking away from his strengths because that dearth of wings that they have, and especially at small forward, that's not his primary position. He's a natural 2 guard. He also, even though he can facilitate, that's not his preferred role. I mean, if you talk to people around the Nuggets, that they don't want to see him working as a facilitator as much just because he's better when he's looking to score, and he's not going to have as many opportunities to do that in this lineup because he's being pigeonholed into a role that isn't really his primary strength. Meanwhile, Tristan Thompson with the Cavaliers knows exactly what he is, whether he's coming off the bench or starting like he did last year, and he's going to be coming off the bench this year. He's a fantastic offensive rebounder, really a scheme-altering offensive rebounder because people know that they have to get a body on him well away from the rim. And in a way, that's floor spacing in and of itself. It's different than being able to thrive as a spot-up shooter, but he does drag bigs out of the paint and open up lanes for the many, many talented drivers on that Cleveland roster. That offensive rebounding is a total game changer. He's become a fantastic roll man at the pick-and-roll game. He's become a much more talented defender who can capably protect the rim, and he's going to be asked to play both power forward and center in a lot of these lineups off the bench. He knows his role. He's filled this role before. He's great in this role. We've talked about him being a key figure for Cleveland in the past, and none of that is changing. Whereas if things change for Barton, it's not for the better.
I would disagree wholeheartedly with it's not for the better. And a more expanded role doesn't mean he has to play a zillion minutes. And it's not that he's going to be off the ball more. He's going to get cleaner looks when he is off the ball. And I don't think there's a problem between playing shooting guard and small forward now. Like, it's positionless basketball. He might be the point guard on the court at some times. And I kind of think you're underselling that aspect for him. And he fills a greater need than Tristan Thompson, who isn't going to be able to stay on the floor against some lineups that the Cavaliers have to run up against. The Nuggets won't necessarily run into that problem with Will Barton. And Tristan Thompson's offense so dependent on those who are around him. That's not going to be Will Barton either. And this award, if we're even going to pull away from these two players, it tends to gravitate toward the volume scores. And Tristan Thompson is not a volume scorer. It seldom recognizes these good defensive presences or these dirty work glue guys. That helps Will Barton as well, because he's going to get scoring opportunities and he's going to play on the ball. You say that's not his preferred role. He's still okay at it, and out of necessity, he's going to need to fulfill it. So I'm just looking at what the Sixth Man of the Year award is typically viewed as. I would have a tough time imagining that Tristan Thompson, let alone another big. And we don't even know if Tristan Thompson is going to be the clear-cut sixth man in Cleveland, with J.R. Smith having been displaced from the starting lineup.
To clarify, I don't think that he's best in an off-ball role. I think that he's best talking about Barton, I think he's best in an on-ball role where he's allowed to thrive as a primary scorer. And that's the role that he's not going to have, even if he's operating at point guard for sporadic minutes. He's gonna struggle against small forwards defensively, just because they've become so big and athletic and physical in the league that it could wear him down. And he's not used to playing off the ball as much as he's going to, with Paul Millsap and Jokic both in the lineup, and the Nuggets pretty intent on getting Jamal Murray a lot of minutes as a primary playmaker. So it again comes back to comfort for me. And you mentioned J.R. Smith, but he's coming off an injury-plagued season where he couldn't shoot the ball, and he might eventually move back into the starting lineup. So I think that Thompson is going to be viewed as the key piece, largely because of his malleability with these lineups. He's going to be able to play next to Kevin Love. He's going to be able to play small ball center. Whatever they need him to do, he knows that he can make an impact and throw people off their game because of the uniqueness of what he brings to the table.
All right, I think you guys both made really good points, like always. I think you guys do a great job outlining your players' strengths. And Adam, I love how you break down and cut the legs out of Will Barton. I love that dirty play. Adam, you had me. I think Tristan Thompson, his role is going to be great there as a sixth man. I think that really fits his strengths. I think you really had me, though, until Dan brought up the point about who wins Sixth Man of the Year awards. And the voters do gravitate towards those high-volume shooting guards. I mean, if you look at the history, I would bet more shooting guards have won that award. And so I got to give the point to Dan for the third straight round. So, Dan, you take the 3-0 lead. Fourth question is, who's going to win the Defensive Player of the Year for 2017-2018 season? Just a reminder to you fans, Dan is up 3-0. So Adam, he's going to start out this round. He has Draymond Green. Dan, he's going to have the rebuttal, and he picked Rudy Gobert. Adam, the floor is yours.
No pressure. If I lose this one, it's basically over, right?
It's over.
All right. So I think we need to get out of the way right off the bat that there's no such thing as voter fatigue here. Both of these guys have been in the mix for the actual award for the last couple of years. We've seen throughout the last couple decades that multiple winners and back-to-back winners are a thing. So the fact that Draymond won last year isn't really relevant here. What does matter is versatility. And there's no doubt that Rudy Gobert is a fantastic rim protector, without question the best in the league. But Draymond Green is also great in that role and at so many other things. He can successfully stifle out pick and rolls, whether he's covering a roll man or a ball handler. He can defend spot-up shooters at multiple positions. He can work in isolation against smaller guys. And really, he's at his best for the Warriors when he's giving them their identity by switching on absolutely everything they do, by essentially functioning as a free safety who can just wreak havoc all over the half-court sets. So especially in today's NBA with so much three-point shooting from everybody, and especially the contenders with the Houston Rockets and the Thunder looking to launch so many triples this upcoming season, that's what matters more, and that's what makes him slightly more valuable. Gobert's going to shut down the inside, but Green can do that and shut down everything on the perimeter.
There's nothing wrong with your argument for Green because he's so versatile, but I do think there will be, though, some voter fatigue for Green. He's been the runner-up twice in 3 years and then actually won the award. So we're kind of looking at like this 3-year cluster, and Rudy Gobert was kind of tangentially involved before these past 2 years, and he's yet to win, which almost helps him. But the misconception here is that Rudy Gobert just isn't this super versatile defender, because I get that there's a knock against big guys. He's going to swallow shots at the rim, and he's going to do it better than anyone else in the league. But he defended more spot-up shooters per game last year than Gordon Hayward. He defended more isolations than anybody on the Jazz. Like, that's a big deal. He will switch. He shouldn't be out jumping past the three-point line every 5 seconds. Maybe Draymond Green is going to defend a lot more pick-and-roll ball handlers. But when you look at the value then that Rudy Gobert adds on top of all of that at the rim, he was third among the 125 players to face 200 shots at the rim in points allowed per attempt, and yet he took almost 600 more. He faced almost 600 more attempts than the first place in that list, which was Joel Embiid. And so when you're going to take that rim protection, which in itself puts him in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation, and then stick onto it that he is this big who can kind of survive in these perimeter situations, I think that's a very big deal that people tend to overlook.
So one of the reasons that he faced so many isolations, and I'll give him that, is that was the way to target him. So opponents of the Jazz would go out of their way to get him on the perimeter because that was the best way to get by him. If they could drag him out, they're taking him away from his biggest strength. So in a lot of ways, guarding so many isolations isn't necessarily a positive because it means that you are able to be attacked in that way. That's how you draw fouls against him. That's how you get him off the court. And if we want to talk about rim protection, when he was stationed at the rim last year, Gobert allowed opponents to shoot 43.8%, which is amazing, unquestionably amazing. Issue is Green actually allowed 43.9%. He didn't face quite as many attempts, but he was damn good in that role when he was there.
Rudy Gobert was good, though, too, in isolation defense. That's fine if you think that that's the best way to attack him, but there are two things that stand out. One, he was still in the 75th percentile of isolation defense, which is damn good for a big guy his size. And two, he's by default manipulating how the offense tries to run itself. And that's another big deal for a big. You don't have those guys who are active deterrents to the points where you're not even going to try and necessarily get to the rim, or you're going to try and go around and figure out another way to beat this defense because of one guy. And we just overlook that so much with Rudy Gobert. And when you look at how he really hasn't received as much shine as Kawhi or Draymond Green over the past few years, I think that's also is what's going to factor into him getting the award this time around.
I think he definitely altered what opponents do against him, but it's almost more impressive for Draymond that you can't alter what you do against him because he's able to contribute in so many different areas. There's no way you're going to be able to avoid him. There was a possession against the Trailblazers last year where he literally guarded all 5 players in a single possession. And I think also the success of a team ends up mattering here. If you finish top in defensive rating, then by default, you're going to get a bit more love. The Warriors did that last year. There's no reason to expect a decline there because they didn't lose any pieces. They added Jordan Bell, who could be an impact even as a rookie. Meanwhile, the Jazz finished third, and they lost Gordon Hayward, who is a surprisingly underrated defender. Actually, on a podcast with Ryan Russillo earlier this week, Zach Lowe said that he considered voting for Hayward as a second-team all-defense guy. That's going to be a big loss, and if the team takes a step back, it's not going to look good for Gobert, even if it's not his fault.
Dan, last
kind of
word
proves
here.
my point for me, just because now he has this less talent around him. Green's allowed to roam a little bit more because all of a sudden Kevin Durant last year was like, hey, I'm going to be a really good rim protector. People don't realize – Andre Iguodala is fantastic. People don't realize that. You don't really need to stash Steph. Klay Thompson is still pretty good. Rudy Gobert, even with Hayward, didn't have quite as many luxuries. And if the Jazz end up being a top 5, top 3 defense again after Gordon Hayward leaves, that almost makes the case unto itself.
I think, once again, you guys do a great job of marking your cases and proving your points. This time, Dan, you won the last 3. I think you did a great job here. Adam, I think you finally get on the board at this point. You did a great job. That versatility in the positionless league that is the NBA today is huge. And that doesn't even take away from, like you said, he has a similar, basically allows the same shooting percentage at the rim as Gobert does. So, Adam, congrats. First ever win, and it's not even a sympathy point.
Finally.
It feels like a sympathy win.
It's probably a sympathy.
It's not a sympathy. I have no sympathy. Also just say that
both these guys are amazing and deserve a lot of love. It's hard to argue against either of them.
Into the lightning round, where each competitor only gets 30 seconds to debate their answer and make their case. So we're going to start out with who's going to be the most improved player for the 2017-18 season. Dan, who holds a 3-1 lead, is going to start us off. He has chosen Gary Harris. Adam, he's going to go second. He has Jusuf Nurkic. So the way this round works is Dan will get 30 seconds, Adam will get 30 seconds, and then just as one quick last rebuttal, Dan will get 10 seconds to finish it off. You ready, Dan? As soon as you start talking, the clock starts running.
Yep, I'm ready. So I go with Gary Harris, and I made the pick before he signed his extension, but I'm still going to roll with it. I think, like kind of similar to Will Barton, we're going to see him take on a bigger role offensively, where he's still going to shoot 70+% on cuts. You're still going to see him post this 60+ effective field goal percentage off the catch, and he'll be even more efficient with Paul Millsap and Nikola Jokic there. But I think we'll see him run more pick and roll, score on his own, and then I think his defense has been on the upswing these past couple of seasons, and he's not very long, but he tries his ass off, and I think that's going to matter for him next season on a good team.
All right, Adam.
So Harris has already improved enough to get 4 years and $84 million this summer. He's already broken out. I'm actually worried he could trend a little bit in the other direction as he tries to build chemistry with Paul Millsap, because cutting is such a big part of his game, and because of Denver's dearth of small forwards, he has to guard up, and he's not comfortable doing that yet. Meanwhile, Nurkic gets to prove that what he began to do, and that's the key, began, is legitimate, and he showed that he can become a much better distributor. He was a key part of their defense, which he'd never shown in Denver, so he's actually completely changing how he approaches the game.
All right, so you guys have each had 30 seconds. I'm going to send it back to Dan now. You get 10 seconds only to make your final case.
I think the problem here is that, for me, Jusuf Nurkic just plays alongside so many really polarizing ball handlers. Like McCollum and Lillard, first instincts are to shoot. Turner, he has to have the ball in his hands. And so you're going to see that affect how he performs in Portland this year.
You are great with time, Dan. Good work. I don't even have to jump in and cut you off. So,
do you have a timer down here too?
So for this first ever Lightning Award, and by default winner of the first ever BasketBrawl, I got to give the point to Dan. I think that he made some good points about Gary Harris and his cutting off ball, and he's only really starting to, the sky's the limit for his potential. So there are 2 questions remaining in the Lightning round, and even though Dan has everything wrapped up, Adam, you're playing for pride. Are you feeling prideful?
Not at the moment, but I'm about to be.
I have faith in you. So this next question, who is going to be the biggest or the most clutch shooter in the NBA this season? Adam, you're going to start us off. You have chosen Stephen Curry as your answer, so you'll get the first 30 seconds. Dan, you'll get the second 30 seconds. You have chosen CJ McCollum, and then we'll throw it back up to you, Adam, for the last 10. Whenever you start talking, the clock will start walking.
So I'm sure that Dan has some fancy numbers, but that's not even what this is about, because we're dealing with small samples here. Steph is just easily the best shooter in the league. It's not even close. He blends volume and efficiency like nobody else. He can create off the dribble even better than anybody else. I mean, the disparity between him and everybody else is crazy. And because of that, there's no one else you should want taking that final shot. I mean, these guys are seasoned professionals. The moment doesn't bother them too much. You want the best shooter taking the biggest shots, and Steph has done that consistently.
That's fine and good that you want Steph taking the last shot, but he's going to have more people competing for those shots with Clay and Draymond and Kevin Durant. CJ McCollum has Damian Lillard. And speaking of samples, 45 game appearances in the clutch. That ranked 9th in the NBA for CJ McCollum. And his shooting slash was 53.5, 44.8, 94.7 with a usage rate north of 20.
All right, so you guys each made your points well short of the 30-second mark. So, Adam, I'm going to send it up to you for one last 10-second rebuttal.
It's not about who can take the most clutch shots. It's about who's going to make them. Remember the half-court buzzer beater against the Thunder, the one over Anthony Davis in the playoffs, the game winner last year against the Magic? Steph has consistently made them.
All right, great points. Dan, I like your confidence. You were just smirking throughout the whole time. You felt like you had this one. Unfortunately, I got to go with Adam. You do want the best shooter taking the last shot, and Steph, like Adam pointed out, has had those times where he's hit those clutch shots. So, Adam, you get the point for pride.
Awesome, I'll take it.
Score at 4-2. We're going into the last question for the Lightning round. Who is going to win the Coach of the Year award for the 2017-18 NBA season? At this point, it's just garbage time. Adam, you can make the score look relatively close if you can get this point, even though those of us who watched it will know it wasn't that close. So, Dan, you're going to start us out with Gregg Popovich. That was the answer that you chose. And Adam, you're the one. Your rebuttal is going to be Erik Spoelstra. So, Dan, as soon as you start talking, the clock will start walking.
The pick has to be Gregg Popovich just because we're kind of at that point where the Spurs are coming off a crummy or just puzzling offseason. You pay Rudy Gay, you pay Pau Gasol, you don't get like FaceTime or chase these big names, and yet we know the Spurs are going to come out, win 55-plus games anyway, and I think this is going to catch people off guard far more than their 61-win season did from last year.
This is the first time in a long time I don't actually feel guaranteed that they're going to win 55 games. It's the shallowest roster in recent memory. It's an old roster. Meanwhile, for Spoelstra to get the Heat into the Eastern playoffs and build upon the second half of last year, he's going to have to show off a lot of creativity. He's dealing with unorthodox players like James Johnson, a primary ball handler from the 2 in Dion Waiters. He's going to run with some big lineups with Whiteside and Adebayo and Olynyk playing together in some capacity. So he has more opportunities to flex his coaching muscles.
All right. You guys have both made your points. So, Dan, I'm going to send it back to you for the last 10 seconds.
I don't have a problem saying we're going to get to 55. If Rudy Gay's even semi-healthy, you get to use him as a small ball forward, and we know LaMarcus Aldridge is more engaged than he was last year entering this season.
All right. Well, good job, you guys, on this first ever round of BasketBrawl. I got to give this point to Dan. Like, that's how it's been going, and it's hard to make any case against Gregg Popovich, even as great as Erik Spoelstra is. So, Dan, you're the first ever winner of BasketBrawl. How does it feel?
I feel like flexing. Off screen, though.
Of course. You flex your muscles today on Adam for sure. So congrats on the win. You're going to go down in BasketBrawl history. Guys, you can follow Dan, the winner of today's episode, on Twitter at Dan Favale. The loser, Adam Fromal. You know, if you want to follow that loser, you can follow him on Twitter at Fromal09. We'll make sure to check us out next time for BasketBrawl, which is brought to you by NBA Math. And remember, only the best points survive.